I'm Ayelet Waldman.
I'm Paul Waldman.
This is Boundary Issues.
Welcome to Boundary Issues, the podcast where two siblings solve all the world's problems while blaming each other for their own. We are going to have a discussion today about the 2024 election and the meme wars. And this is going to be a great episode because we have two terrific guests that I will introduce in a moment. But by way of introduction, I think that the real sort of meme campaign that we are still in can be traced at the very least back to 2016, when Steve Bannon realized that there was an army of angry edgelord gamers that he could mobilize on Donald Trump's behalf. You couldn't say that that's why he became president, but it certainly helped. And then you fast forward to 2024, the beginning of the campaign. Joe Biden is not a particularly internet savvy politician.
And everybody who works on his campaign is 275 years old, so...
Something like that. But now that Kamala Harris is the Democratic nominee, there has just been a dramatic transformation of the campaign in all kinds of ways. But we wanted to talk about how the internet campaign has changed. So we have two terrific guests. Amanda Marcotte is a senior politics writer at Salon and one of the sharpest commentators on American politics. I would encourage everyone to read what she writes. There are not very many people out there about whom I say every single thing that they write is interesting and has something that'll make you think. But Amanda is one of those people. She is also the author of Troll Nation, How the Right Became Trump-Worshipping Monsters Set on Rat-Fucking Liberals, America, and Truth Itself, a book that is extremely relevant to this topic. And our other guest is Jennifer Stromer-Galley, who is a professor in the School of Information Studies at Syracuse University and the author of Presidential Campaigning in the Internet Age, an award-winning book. So I'm sure they have lots to say about our topic. Maybe I'll start with you, Amanda, since you pay a lot of attention to what's going on the right. Could you maybe describe for us your impressions of what the Trump campaign and its supporters are doing on social media? What kind of strategy are they employing at the moment?
Well, what's funny is since Harris jumped in the race, I think the strategy has really gone to shit. They have gone haywire. And I think just like Donald Trump himself, like there's not a real, they're still using kind of meme warfare tactics as they always have, but it's been very difficult for them to zero in on a specific idea that they can meme and replicate over and over and over again until it starts to sink into public consciousness. I think in part because it's like such a crowd of bitter, socially maladjusted people. They're just sort of emoting right now. All the feelings that Harris, her family, Walz, his family, their dogs, whatever, are causing in them. And it's been kind of interesting. I've been getting a lot of hate mail this week because I wrote a piece about how the MAGA trolls just have gone after Kamala Harris's stepdaughter.
I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah. She's poor kid. I mean, she just seems like a sweet kid, and she's not a kid. She's a 25-year-old woman, but you know, I'm 46. She's a kid. And it's been interesting watching how much they have gone after her because she sort of fits a meme that already existed in the like manosphere, incel sphere, like angry sexist troll sphere. Sorry about my meowing cat.
That's okay.
Idea, which is that like there's these purple-haired Brooklyn hipsters that they just are obsessed with, and she's not purple-haired, but they're kind of rounding her up because she's got tattoos. Mm-hmm. She wears glasses. She dresses in a way that's not like trying to please like the dumbest male gaze. And they just cannot with her. But it's funny because none of this, I think, is strategic. I think they used to try to be strategic.
Jenny, you have been studying this stuff for a while now and have seen this transformation of internet politics from a time when it was before social media to now when we have social media. Do you think there's something like distinct about this year, that it's matured in a way that it wasn't 4 years ago or 8 years ago? And let me maybe ask the question this way. What do we know about what kind of effect this actually has on voters. Is it just people talking to their own side and making each other laugh and getting each other angry? And is it more likely to have an effect this time than it did in previous years?
So thanks for having me on. I love the opportunity to gab with really smart people about weird political things like Kamala is brat, and have chatted with a lot of journalists actually over the last while about some of the weird memes and interesting memes that have cropped up this election season. I wouldn't say that this particular election is more memorific than a typical presidential election season. You might remember when Mitt Romney was the Republican nominee in 2012 at a debate. He talked about potentially ending funding to public broadcasting, and that triggered a whole set of memes about Mitt Romney basically axing Big Bird, and that circulated through social media. There was also the meme, speaking still of Romney, when it came to light that he strapped his dog in a kennel at the top of the car for their vacation, right? That was memeified.
And those are the two things that I remember about Romney. Like the rest of it, he just sort of fades into random, from that campaign.
Yes.
Just like a Republican morass. But I remember the dog and I remember Sesame Street.
But I think to your point, Ayelet, that's the deal, right? So there's not good research that suggests that memes have an effect on voter turnout or electoral decision making, but they do shape the image of the candidates. And that still matters, right? It doesn't necessarily have a tangible effect on outcomes, but it contributes to the public's understanding of the candidates. And for low-informed voters, there's been some talk as of late again about low-informed voters. I don't love that phrase because it feels a bit derogatory. I mean, people for a lot of reasons don't pay attention to politics. We live it, right? The four of us here, because that's our livelihoods. But for most people, it's not.
Not my livelihood. I just live it because I'm neurotic and crazy and angry all the time. But it is your three livelihoods.
Fair enough. But, I think for people who aren't paying much attention to politics, the memes can break through in ways that some of the other messaging, especially the more strategic messaging by the candidates, doesn't necessarily break through because it doesn't spread, it doesn't have the same sort of catchiness to it. So I think the memes help really shape the ways that the public can think about the candidates for good or for bad. And it gives us some fun things to talk about.
This goes back to, Amanda, what I was going to ask you about with this whole the negative memeing, the sort of the Ann Coulter attack on Gus, the MAGA attack on Ella.
So gross.
So gross. Now, the question I wanted to ask you guys is, can a meme bite you in the ass? So will those things that they tried to get traction on, will that ultimately hurt them? And the same thing, Amanda, you talk about the fake dog thing, which is dude has a dog, shut the fuck up. But will that kind of stuff hurt the MAGA right, do you think?
I think that one thing that a lot of people when they're talking about memes don't understand is that they don't have magical power over people. They're just kind of sticky ideas, but they're always refracted through what people's previous understanding of the situation is. To quote a meme that's taken off, we didn't fall from the coconut tree.
Right.
You exist in a context. And I think that they definitely were trying to memify Gus Walls. They were definitely trying to, the MAGA right was trying to memify Gus Walls. They were trying to memify Ella Emhoff. They were trying to hold these people out as sort of human examples of concepts that sort of percolate through, especially what I call the incel right, which is in itself a meme.
Mm-hmm.
And it ends up, I think, only reinforcing their image as people with serious psychological issues. But I think to most people, I think to them, it was patently obvious that there's something embarrassing about Gus Walls loving his father. And to them, it was obvious that Doug Emhoff should be ashamed that his daughter is a hipster instead of a trad wife. But I think that, again, another meme. I feel like I spend so much time on the internet, I only speak in memes these days. But it ends up making them, I think, to most people look really ugly. And the best example of this, I think, obviously was J.D. Vance's cat ladies concept, right?
Your cat just meowed right
Perfect
at that
timing.
The
second.
timing could not have been better.
Good work, Fred. um, Cat ladies is a MAGA meme. It pre-exists the MAGA movement, but it has this like real stickiness within, and that's where JD Vance got it. I'm called a cat lady even before he said it. I've been called a cat lady like 15 times a day for years now.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, duh.
I have a cat. I'm
Yeah,
a lady.
I have 3 cats and I'm a lady.
Wow. Okay, dude, you are a cat lady. I'm just going to put that. Okay. Speak on, Amanda / lady cat lady.
But like when JD Vance said it, like what happened was it ended up being refracted through how most people hear that, which is that's ugly and mean, and also like what's it to you if somebody isn't married and has some cats, you know? And I think I've heard just out in the wild, just walking around Philadelphia, talking to people at my partner's record store and stuff, the cat lady thing over and over and over again. It has hit this like massive saturation point. And everyone hates it. They're just like, who cares? Let people have cats.
See, that's the thing. I think that so many of the right's attempts to memify things, maybe not all of them, like who gives a shit about Tim Walz's dogs, but so many of them come from a really kind of mean-spirited place. And I think within that circle, that's what's already valued for a lot of the online right, is like the nastier you can be, the better. There's a reason that you called your book Troll Nation, because that's the whole point, is being cruel, being mean, and that's how you get cachet within that world. But I think also to other people who view it, and this may not apply to your average normie 60-year-old voter, in Dubuque or whatever, because they're not aware of this stuff in general, but there are a lot of people who are very online, but who don't have firm political attachments and things like that. I think, and maybe this is just me because I'm a squishy liberal, it just comes across as so mean-spirited that I think it alienates people regardless of what the content of it is.
Jenny, do you think that's true?
Yeah, I do. I don't have any public opinion data to back it up, but I was thinking about Trump's effort to denigrate Tim Walz by calling him Tampon Tim.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That did not land well. I listened to the audio track on that, and it just doesn't land. And I think that there are 100% for the trolls, for that kind of extreme, we get our shits and giggles from making other people feel bad, then whatever. But I think for most ordinary Americans, that only goes so far. And I think Trump's efforts to continue to be so nasty and derogatory no longer has the novelty effect, and that, wow, he's edgy and isn't that novel and interesting in the age of the internet where everybody can be truly authentic and say what they really mean. At some point you're like, enough, actually, I don't really need to be confronted with these kinds of mean messages. Life is hard and I can barely pay my rent, and I don't need somebody who's constantly attacking everything that people are trying hard to do. So I don't know. I think there is a point where Americans, generally speaking, say, this isn't working for me. It works on the fringes, but I think for the mainstream, it's working less and less.
On the Tampon Tim thing, I think it also dials into something that's really important to understand about memes, is like what makes something a meme, in my opinion, or at least an effective one, is that it has a lot of ideas packed into it often, but it has to sort of package all those ideas in one like straight shot. So like cat lady, however you feel about that, you immediately know what it means, right? You know, when you hear trad wife, even if you've never heard it before, you probably have a pretty good idea what that means, right? The whole idea of a meme is just sort of triggering that context, triggering all of these things without having to sort of explain itself. And what Tampon Tim is interesting to me, because I think everyone immediately hears it and they grasp that the point of this is that there's something wrong with caring about women and caring about their health care. And that was how it was intended. But the problem is they immediately know how bad that sounds. And so I've seen a lot of people who are trying to get that meme out there, they're explaining it.
Right.
Like,
no, it was about
this.
tampons in boys' rooms, whereas that
And once
doesn't
you're
register. that
Once
just
you're
registers.
explaining it,
Yeah.
it's failed its purpose.
Like that to me, I didn't even realize they were talking at all about the whole idea of it being in boys' rooms. I was like, yeah, give girls tampons for free. What a great idea. What dad has not had that experience of having to go buy tampons for his daughter? Like my husband, I was out of town when my youngest got her period, and he was like standing having a complete brain meltdown in front of the I mean, like that feels like that is the kind of one that bites them in the ass, and then they're frantically trying to, go back and revise it. But what are some of the ones that have stuck for them? And then I definitely want to talk about the ones that make us feel good. But like, what are some of the ones that you think are still sticky for the right that we need to either just be depressed about or figure out a way to combat?
Well, that's why they're so upset, because Biden is old was incredibly effective.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean,
and they had the Let's Go Brandon thing, which the Democrats tried to turn around in this whole dark Brandon thing, but I think it probably served the right internally more than that attempt to kind of do a little judo move on it served the left. But that worked for them for a while because, it was kind of funny. And if you knew where it came from, you felt like an insider because you knew what the reference was to. And it had that sort of hint of rebellion in it, that sort of little free zone of being a little bit naughty because it made a reference to people, who were actually saying, fuck you, Biden. So every time you said, let's go, Brandon, you knew what it really meant. And that could make you feel a little naughty in that way. But it seems like they have not succeeded in coming up with anything about Kamala, which I think is interesting because so much of this is so gendered, right? Like the right's argument is always that liberal men are in fact not men, but are women, and liberal women are in fact not women, but are men. Hillary Clinton got this much more, I think, than Kamala Harris has for her whole career. Like that was always the joke about Hillary Clinton. And you saw that not even just from some conservatives, but from sort of like mainstream comedians and stuff. That would always be the joke, that she actually had balls or whatever it was, that she was actually a man. And you haven't seen much of that, I think, from conservatives. They can't quite wrap their head around it. And one of the interesting things is that Donald Trump finds her hot. And he can't quite figure out what to do with that. He talks about how beautiful she is.
Oh
and
my God.
it's scrambling his brains a little bit.
And then he talks about how beautiful he is.
Right. Which
in this like weird
it's so interesting that because I mean that's one of the things I want to talk to you guys, like the trading card. So I'm looking at those trading cards. That's them trying to create memes, right? And then there's those ones with him looking all buff and young on those trading cards. Are those effective? Because I see one of those and all I think about is how hideous he is now.
They are effective, and I know that it's like it's one of those things that it took me a while to understand, and I swim in these waters, unfortunately. But the fact of the matter is, it's because it's a bit of a joke, right? Like the joke is he doesn't look like that. It's not a good joke, but like the kind, it's sort of a way of them sort of patting each other on the back for knowing that he actually does look like a lumbering old man who with a comical comb over and a lot of makeup. But I think that the joke is that yet nonetheless he is a strong man, and so they can kind of use it to sort of work on two levels. And I would say that like Trump is the like strong man is like the meme that's been most effective for them this election cycle.
So that if Kamala's team can figure out a way to make him look weak, would that combat that, or is it just hopeless?
I think it would.
Like
I think
memify his weakness and whatever it is.
I think that's what they're trying to do, and I think it is so far been pretty successful. Like paint him as a whiner and a coward, and it helps that just like with Biden is old, Trump is a whiny coward, has like that frisson of truth.
Right. Bone spur Trump. I mean, okay, this is a really stupid question, and this is for both of you. Can we just define meme?
Jenny, maybe you can do that for us as the academic here.
Do I have to? Yeah. So memes are actually kind of hard to define, actually, right? I mean, we tend to use metrics around how much they spread as a dimension, right? So it's not a meme if nobody is engaging it. It's just a funny little joke between a couple of friends. So, a meme has to have, I like, Amanda, your phrase of stickiness. I like that. There's something about that. They are referencing multiple things at once and often kind of riffing on people's implicit cultural knowledge to fill in gaps of argument, if you will, that the meme isn't making explicitly, but then you fill in I'm doing a terrible job as an academic defining this, aren't I?
No, you're not. I mean, because like when I first heard the word meme, I was just like, oh, that's a picture with a phrase. But it's so much more than that. Was it always more than that? Or is it just now that we've developed this notion that it's become more than that? Maybe I'm asking, like, have there always been memes? We just didn't call them that?
Yeah, I think so.
Always. And it started with Richard Dawkins, didn't it? Like his like notion that
The
it's
selfish
like a
gene.
piece of it's like a piece of DNA that sort of replicates itself, but an idea. This is going to be kind of weird, but I spend a lot of time. We write trivia, my partner and I, for a bar trivia we do, and so one of our games is that we play a snippet of a song and we have people guess the next line. And the sort of like way that you would pick which line you do is you usually pull one out that is the memorable line of the song. Or like a poem or something like that. And I think of a meme as kind of like that. It's like that little bit of ephemera that like sort of it's got a stands in for the whole kind of like idea for it. It just feels good to people to say it or repeat it or to share it.
First of all, Kamala HQ on social media, mwah, chef's kiss, love them. But do you think that's another meme right there? Just did a meme. Do you think that fact that they're hitting so well and so many of them are hitting so well is because of they're so smart, or is it almost an accident? Like I feel like Tim Waltz, this whole idea of him as everybody's dad, his very existence is a meme almost, right?
Amanda, do you want to?
Well,
Maybe
I mean,
as the dad who likes to do Homer pair in this group, should
And
answer
yet
that. No,
doesn't come
I
off
think
as America's dad at all. Maybe comes off as America's annoying younger brother.
could be. I don't know why he has managed to be popular in a way I haven't. It's a mystery.
I don't know, dude. Not a mystery to me.
well, and this would be like a good example is like, okay, Tim Walz is like Goober Dad, or Coach Walls. There's another way that he's been
Mhm.
memeified. That's the shorthand for a whole like structural concept. And I think that concept is a model of masculinity that is both very masculine. It fits like all the like ideas of what people think masculinity is, yet is positive in contrast to the sort of toxic masculinity that the right is peddling. So when we say Coach Walls, where it's a stand-in for things like cares about other people, brave, says what he means, simple but good. There's a lot of masculinity kind of things in there. And I find that a little upsetting sometimes because women can also be all these things. Femininity can be all these things, masculinity, but that's a whole other rabbit hole. But like, I do appreciate that. I think a lot of people want a positive model of masculinity, and Coach Walls is a shorthand for what that could be.
It's interesting to me too I feel like that's an aspirational kind of masculinity, and the incel masculinity that JD Vance has started to sort of symbolize for a lot of people. The sort of maybe I don't know. It's like a weird combination to me. Maybe we could try to figure out what it is. It's like weird incel pandering, Yaley, which is funny given his background, toxic internet dude, toxic VC dude, like all that has combined in this weird way to define him. And it stands in such a non-aspirational. No, most guys don't want to be that, but so many like being a good dad, being a coach, that kind of thing is a really positive aspirational masculinity. It's like the Friday Night Lights guy, right?
And I think part of the reason that is so attractive to so many people is because we've been told for a while now that there is this hunger among young men to define themselves and understand what being a man means in today's world, and they don't feel like they can find their place. And so many of them turn to this kind of manosphere culture that says you can define your manhood through this kind of angry orientation to the world and misogyny and all these other things. And I am sure that there are millions upon millions of young men who feel that same kind of lack and feel that same feeling adrift in that way, not really knowing what their gender is supposed to represent, but still find incel culture repugnant. So maybe a lot of those people look at a video of Tim Walz talking about proper gutter maintenance which I don't know if you've seen that one.
Oh
It's
my God,
very
I can't
endearing.
believe it's adorable. And I can't believe that is everywhere. That
Yeah, and they can look at something like that and say, "Oh, okay. Well, here's a kind of man you can aspire to be. You know, he takes care of things. He's competent in the world and in his environment, and he is also caring for his neighbors. He's somebody that people look up to because he has this ethic of caring, and he still is competent and does sort of many of the traditional manly things that are done. And so I don't think we've really talked about the millions of young men who do feel some of that lack in their own understanding of how they relate to the world, but find the rights answer repugnant.
Jenny, is there incel research? Like, has somebody done a deep dive into data about the sort of what we've been calling the incel world?
Yeah, there is. That is not research that I have high fluency in, so I'm not the right person to ask you. I mean, I know about incels. I've worked. I don't know how to put that. That's a weird phrase. I, I definitely am aware.
I've experienced
Yeah.
with incels.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. The challenge in studying the incel culture is that it's hard to quantify, right? So I can't say X% of people sort of align themselves with the incel movement the same way I can say X% of Americans identify with being a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a bit of a fringe
Mm-hmm.
culture, but it is pervasive. So even though the number of people that I think strongly self-identify and communicate, engage in incel culture is relatively small, it does kind of bleed into kind of everyday discourse, especially with younger people. So, TikTok and Snapchat, you see these references that if you know, you know, and they're incel references. And so it kind of sneaks into the broader culture.
There are not a lot of men, I imagine, the majority don't want to be thought of as I can't get laid. That's not something that your average man wants. No matter what, I can't get it. I can't get any action.
But the average man can feel resentful, right?
Exactly.
That things aren't happening for them in the ways that they expect it to be happening in a heteronormative masculine culture.
I would say at this point, incel is kind of more of a meme in a lot of ways there is the subculture of incels, but like it's become kind of a meme in general that's like Coach Walls, but in this case it's like a term that gets applied to sort of fairly lavishly and generously to any man that sort of acts like resentful, bitter, like it seems to be harboring like grudges from high school. So like JD Vance has a wife and 3 kids. He's obviously not celibate, but he gives strong incel energy nonetheless.
Right? He does. It's so strange.
It feels so performative. Yeah, I was just having a chat with somebody about, is he for real? Or is this all just some kind of performance that he's doing so that he can get into this position of power? It's like, very strange.
I think it's partially it's a little bit of both. I think that he has in the last few years been marinating in a particular corner of conservative culture where you see a lot of these people who have really extraordinary ambitions for kind of a government takeover and a cultural takeover and kind of rampaging through all the institutions. And he has been very much immersed in that world. And when you look at some of the speeches that he's given and things that have gotten less attention, you kind of come up short because you realize that he's been playing around with these ideas that these guys, and they seem to be almost all guys, have been talking about intensely in the last few years. And, sure, he's opportunistic. And the fact that he's on the ticket is because, he's very ambitious, like most politicians, and managed to find a way to get there. But the other interesting thing about him is that this is maybe getting a little bit afield, although it does relate to the donut shop meme, which is, for those who haven't seen it, I feel like we should kind of explain some of these things. He did a little event where he went into a donut shop and was completely awkward, did not really know how to relate to people, and didn't really know how to engage with people. He would ask a question, and then the person that working at the donut shop would answer, and he'd say, okay, and not really be able to keep the conversation going. And it was extremely awkward.
And then couldn't even pick a fucking donut. I mean, that's what stuck with me from there. Like, what donut, if you're a normal human, like, I like a plain old fashioned and a raised glaze. Like, everybody knows their donut. And he's like, I don't know. Give me what was the
Give me some with sprinkles. Something with some sprinkly things. And
God.
But the problem he has is that, and this is, I think, really unusual for almost anybody that we've seen on a ticket in modern history. He only ran one campaign before being put on a national ticket.
Mm-hmm.
And normally, if you look at someone like Tim Walz, he ran for Congress a bunch of times, he ran for governor, so he's got a lot more political experience. And I think also in his case, the fact that he spent 20 years trying to sustain the attention of teenagers is part of why he's such a good communicator. But most politicians who get to be on a national ticket have run a bunch of races, and they know how to do that thing where you go into a store and nobody, is really sure who you are, and you have to engage them. It's just a common skill that you pick up. But he is a little bit adrift because he's not like a super personable guy. He's not a real extrovert, and he hasn't done this before, so he doesn't have a lot of practice. And so he is creating memes as he goes out and
like
tries
we're
to
paying
campaign.
him to, as if he was on the payroll. But what about back to Tim Walz, this thing that I'm thinking about, like we always say, politicians are statistically taller, statistically better looking, and yet I feel like Tim Walz's sort of looks older than he is. That's also memed, right? Like the whole line about the lunchroom. You try, supervising lunchroom for 15 years. That'll make anybody look old. Like that stuff seems to be memeified in a positive way too, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think what has been so fascinating about him, and it really does get to our fascination with memes, is that everything about him is just sort of that, like, whatever Coach Walz, Dad Walz, whatever you want to call it, like is sort of a meme that stands in for all these kinds of wholesome masculinity. But like, it's been fascinating watching the people on the right just not be able to deal with this. They keep trying to prove that he's not the real deal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's become something of an obsession. They want to somewhat break the meme somehow. They want to like
the dog is fake. He's only an assistant coach.
I saw the guy who runs that super tradcath magazine, Lamplight or whatever it's called. He lost it on Twitter because Walz was buying a record player for his daughter and did a little video setting it up, and he wanted to like get into stereophile wars with him over this. Like, you bought the wrong record player, you bought the wrong amplifier. And like, I couldn't help it. My partner owns a record store. I popped in and was like, no, this is exactly the one you should get.
Well, that does raise a question. How much of this can be done strategically and how much just has to be organic?
Yeah, that's sort of what I'm thinking. Like,
do it from above.
Is Kamala's team doing it on purpose, or is it just this blessed accident? When she went into the bakery, that was on purpose, right? She went into the bakery and went crazy for a caramel chocolate cake. And I'm like, I 1,000% believe she's going to eat that cake. But I also wonder if she didn't go in the bakery because the fucker can't go into a donut shop without losing his mind.
Well, I mean, I think it's really hard to manufacture effective, true spreadable memes, right? So campaigns spend a lot of energy and effort trying to construct them, because it is a bit of a holy grail if you can get something to go viral and reach a much broader audience than you're typically talking to at a rally or in your kind of core support base. That's gold, because again, it helps with your brand. It helps get to people who aren't paying that much attention to politics and let them know a little bit about you, hopefully in a positive way. So a lot of money is spent by campaigns working with consultants and influencers to try to figure out how to make that memeable thing. But as we've been talking about, because of the complexity of the message that makes a meme, requiring those cultural moments, they're often fairly accidental. And I don't know, like when you see a meme that works, you can feel it. Do you know what I mean? There is almost like this emotional plus cognitive dopamine buzz that you get from like, that works, that's good. And that's hard to manufacture.
Well, that reminds me, Jenny, our mutual friend, Danigal Goldthwaite-Young, has done a lot of research on political humor. And one of the things she talks about is that sort of spark of recognition when you realize that you get the joke and how that gives you that kind of dopamine hit. When you realize you get the meme, that's very satisfying.
Yep.
But one thing that strikes me about this that's so different now is a lot of things are different now that Harris is the Democratic nominee. But, for a long time, part of being a Trump supporter, the attraction was that it was fun in a way that it hadn't been for a lot of Republican campaigns. That, Trump rallies are full of jokes and laughter and music, and the whole attraction of Trumpism is that you can be rebellious and you can kind of let your worst self out, and that's fun, and you get that hit of being in a community and doing this stuff that really is enjoyable for the people. I mean, if you go to a Trump rally, you'll see people are having a really good time, and people go back over and over and over and over again. It's like a Dead show or a Fish show, that there are people who just follow him around because they like the scene. And it was not very enjoyable to be a Joe Biden supporter. They gave it a shot with some of that stuff, but it was pretty miserable. And now you just had this eruption of joy. That's the word everyone uses and the campaign uses to describe what happened. I think a lot of it is just relief.
Yeah.
But she, is memeable in a way that he wasn't. She laughs, she dances, she's enjoying herself on the campaign trail in a way that Biden never seemed to be. And so it makes being a supporter of hers fun in a way that it really wasn't before.
And then they're doing stuff that's making it fun too. Like they're using humor, like that whole weird thing that Walt started. I mean, that I feel like we've been sort of saying what's true, which is this is the rise of autocracy. This is the rise of fascism. This is the elections that's going to change everything in a terrible way. But then something catches on like weird that is, it's great because you're just like, ew, and you don't want to be ewed even by people you don't agree with, right? Isn't that? Do you guys think that that's kind of what's going on with the weird?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has it's almost too simple to be a meme, but it functions on the same kind of level, which is it's such a word with so many connotations and they're all applicable.
Right.
So it's really helpful because it's got a lot of flexibility and just happens to be the word people tend to use automatically when they're describing everything from the fascism to the makeup situation with Donald Trump. I think it's helpful. The meme that I think is kind of fascinating when you think about Kamala is the Kamala is brat one.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Okay, I am turning 60 this year, but I do have 4 children. I still don't really understand. Please explain for me and the idiots in the audience what is brat? What does it mean? I know the singer, the blah blah. What does it mean?
It was fun. So we had a listening party at the record store when that album came out. So I saw firsthand that this was going to be the album of the summer. We have a lot of these, but no so many people showed up. It was so many people.
Not Chapel Roan even?
We hadn't had a listening party for her. Okay. I mean, she's really popular, but no, Charlie, the packed in, and then they were in that standing. People were we put the speaker outside, and people were standing on the street listening to it. And it was a few days before it came out, so it was very exciting. But the album is basically about being young and female and free. It's not really any kind of deeper than that. It's speaking to a lot of people right now, I think. About what they want their futures to look like, and not just women. I think queer people of all genders as well really are relating to this record. And so when Charlie said Kamala is brat, it clicked because it was compared to Biden, she's young, female, and free.
Right. And brat just means is it a brat, don't be a brat, or you're a brat, or what is it stand for something?
Brat, reclaiming bitch in
the
90s.
becoming queer and
Yeah.
And you don't I feel like, tell me, but in my little old age home, what it means. So it's not, you don't use you don't use you just use brat. So brat. I am by this very conversation indicating that I am not brat.
I'm also too old.
It's funny because
for
so much of your life, that's how people refer to you.
Isn't it? That's actually, fuck you. That's actually true. I swear that, don't you? Okay, we're not going to talk about it personally, but I feel like there was a lot of time where I was given serious brat energy. I wrote a whole book about microdosing with psychedelics. For, a middle-aged Jewish lady, that's pretty much as brat as she can get.
Well, so brat is not a noun, right? It's an adjective. And I think that's
an adjective.
Yeah. So it's not Kamala is a brat, right? that make her a noun.
Right.
Kamala is brat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kamala is pretty, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and you're a little bit messy, a little bit transgressive, but you're fun and you're carefree in a way that is healthy and positive.
And you're competent.
Yes, 100%. Actually, yes. So it's got this positive connotation. It's not negative. And again, it's one of those, you're taking a word that often has a negative connotation and turning it into something that has positive associations and energy around it.
I think the competent part is super important, because I think one of the reclamation projects is kind of going on here is that the idea that women that are uncontrolled are bad, are stupid, they're bimbos, they're whatever. But Charlie's point on the album is, yeah, I may do a lot of cocaine and sleep all day, but then I get up and hit the studio and I'm one of the best singers in the business, and
Right.
you can't take that from me. And I don't think anyone's saying Kamala does a bunch of cocaine, but
it's interesting because in a way that almost defined her from the outset, right? Like that brat started her campaign on day one, I feel like has defined her in a way that's really exciting. And to think that might be, if we win, God, I hope we win, that part of it might be because of Charlie. That's so awesome to think about, right? There was this thing, did you guys catch God, Judy Vance, he posted on Twitter that there was a meme. Remember the meme of the pageant contestant from South Carolina who was just speaking in this insane word salad, and he posted that and said something about Kamala. And my first
It was
reaction
in response to her. It was in response to her interview on CNN. Well, I think maybe while it was going on, she was I think a Miss Teen USA contestant, and they asked her some question about politics or something, and as Ayelet says, she gave this whole word
this
salad,
poor
and it was
girl.
totally embarrassing. And she was one of those people who got dragged relentlessly online for it. And it's one of those things where the first time you see it, you're like, oh my God, that's so funny. And then immediately you're like, oh, this person's life is going to be hell now. And apparently it was. So he brought that back and tweeted something like, this is what I'm thinking of listening to Kamala Harris do this interview.
I was so angry about it, but then I thought, oh no, actually fine, because that poor girl, sure, there are lots of people who are just going to be like, what an idiot, but they're also triggering oh, that poor girl. And second of all, it's such a contrast, because whatever you think about her, is it sticking, this idea that Trump keeps saying too, that she's unintelligent? What is Vance saying? She didn't go to Yale, so she's dumber than me. What are they trying to say with that? And is there any stickiness to it?
So this one I worry about a little bit, because I don't yet see Harris come forth with a clear set of policy messages. And my concern on that score is that then she is definable. And then the Republicans can start to construct her as not having competence, to being a blubbering idiot who isn't very smart and just says what needs to get said but doesn't have any real substance. I know that this new policy, sort of economic policies, just came out. I have opinions. That's not the point of this particular conversation, but I do worry that if they don't really start to get some meaty but thoughtful and catchy phrasing around some of these policy dimensions, there's a risk for stickiness, I think.
Why aren't they doing that? Paul, do you have an insight on why aren't they slamming that out fast?
I think that they probably think that there's no point in putting out a bunch of white papers and 10-point plans like you were John Kerry or Michael Dukakis, because it doesn't work. Nobody cares.
Yeah, no,
but you could put
I
out
don't disagree.
3 points, right?
Yeah,
you could
that's
say
it.
X, what do we think about the economy? We think boom, boom, boom. What are we going to do about the grocery store? Boom, boom, boom. What are we going to do about Gaza? Boom, boom, boom. I feel like you could do that.
But and she's trying, right? So she is. The problem is that she's behind Trump on this, right? So Trump's already pushed out this idea of not taxing tips. And so she comes out afterwards and says basically the same thing. Now she just looks like a copycat.
Right.
From my perspective, this has been a historic problem for the Democratic Party. They are abysmal on the economic message, have been for decades, and continue to be yet again this election season. Bidenomics was what a failure of a concept. I don't see at this point that Harris is coming forth with some very clear messaging that ordinary people understand and that they see will actually make a difference. This stuff on taxing tips, come on, right? That's such a tiny percentage of the public, and it doesn't really address the fundamental economic issues that ordinary people are facing. My disappointment with the Democratic Party is they won't actually get a proper economic plan. So it doesn't have to be 50 points, but it needs to be clear and it needs to actually do something. And that they can't seem to do.
I think that with Trump defining her as stupid, I wonder for him how much of that is just racial, because we see that from the right every time there's a person of color, especially a woman of color. That's always the first thing that they go to, and at times when it's just mind-boggling. I don't know if I've ranted about this on the podcast before, but like if you look at Supreme Court nominations, someone like Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is like Hermione Granger, she's the person at the front of the room with her hand up because she knows all the answers and she did the extra credit work, and she did the extra credit work for the other three people in her group who didn't want to do anything, so they let her write the report. That's who she's always been and excelled at every level. And they call her stupid. And yet a guy like Brett Kavanaugh, who just kind of slid through life, nobody in his life ever looked at him and said, that guy's a superstar. No one said about him, like, we need to see his LSAT scores because we don't think he's really up to the job. It's only Ketanji Brown Jackson and Sonia Sotomayor. Same thing, somebody who was valedictorian of her high school class and like worked to catch up to all the private school kids she met at Princeton and excelled and surpassed them. As soon as she was nominated, what did they say? She's stupid. It's just a thing that conservatives do when confronted with a woman of color. I don't know. I guess I haven't seen it other than from Trump himself. I haven't seen as much of that, but maybe I'm not tuned in. Maybe that's what conservatives are saying about Kamala Harris.
Tellingly, he uses the same, he doesn't just say stupid. He always says low IQ, which is a very racialized like idea. That's like his brain is stuck in the 80s. He's still thinking about the bell curve. Like that's where he's at. And it shows that like one of the dangers of making Trump your God emperor, which is another meme of your meme war, is that like the ones that make the most sense to him are 40 years out of date. And the older he gets, the harder he's having, the more trouble he's having. Because JD Vance, like, as screwed up as sharing that video was, he at least is young enough to recognize that like if they're going to make this idea that Harris is a lightweight stick, they got to do it on gender, not race, because it's just going to gross people out if it's about race. And so he deliberately tied her to a
white girl,
an image of like the stereotypical blonde bimbo meme, right? And I'm not trying to call that girl a bimbo. I'm saying that that's what that's evoking. And so they're trying to call her a bimbo.
Do you think if Kamala kicks his ass in a debate, that could end a meme? Or do you think, no, there's nothing that can end a meme like that?
Yeah, it absolutely could backfire. She kicks his ass in the debate. Part of what's going on is they keep saying she's stupid. They keep saying she's a lightweight, and they just lowered expectations to the basement on her. So that's kind of old school politics. It's a little bit outside of just meme warfare, but that's part of it. Is if you props up a stereotype about somebody and then they just sort of smash through it. Like the right tried to do this over and over again to Obama, and he just sort of repelled a lot of that stuff.
Okay, so now we've wasted enough of your time, but I'm just going to ask you because I'm so sick of asking my brother because he's always fucking wrong. Is she going to win? You're always wrong, dude. You were so wrong about Clinton. You destroyed my life. You were so wrong. Okay, now you guys.
Clinton was like a 1 out of 100.
I'm gonna blame him till the day I die.
And if you gamble enough, you realize 1 out of 100 happens. I've seen somebody like do the fire roll in craps. It happens. I've seen a royal flush. It happens.
See, that's why I don't make predictions anymore. It's a toss-up. It could go either way.
Yeah, no, I'm with Paul. I actually like Clinton. That one burned me. I actually thought that, remember Al Gore?
Yeah.
So yeah, I kind of thought Al was going to win. I was sort of hopeful that John Kerry was going to win, mostly because I was so against that war. But, I realized that the American public isn't me. And
it's an important thing to keep in mind.
It is, yeah, for a variety of reasons. But I don't know. It's going to be really close. The polling suggests that key Swing states are showing a bit of an increase in support for Harris, but a lot of it's going to boil down, as it always does, to turnout. And again, this is where the memes, I do think, matter a little bit, because they do signal how much energy there is around a candidate. And a campaign, when you don't see a lot of memes, a lot of buzz, if you will, that suggests that maybe there's the enthusiasm is low. And I think we were definitely seeing that with Biden. There just wasn't much happening with him. And there is a lot now with Harris. So that suggests a lot of energy. And that might suggest that there's going to be more turnout. But I guess what I want to be clear about is the memes don't cause it. I think the memes are actually kind of a symptom of that energy, if you will. But it can be a bit of a diagnostic,
And
though.
they can't like gin it up? No?
I don't think they hurt, but it's, well, depending on what it is, they're likely not going to be the causal difference of 10,000 votes in a given district.
All right, well, let's just hope to God that we don't end up, I can't even imagine.
I'm actually a little more optimistic that the memes might have some turnout effect, because I live in a swing state and I talk to people, and the Biden was just, everything was just getting weighed onto him and people hated him. And Kamala is brat. And now I'm talking about younger people, but has almost given her like armor.
Mm-hmm.
I think that has made it difficult to hang some of the like turnout discouraging ideas around her neck, like that she's a sellout or something like that. The very people I've heard say mean things about Biden seem kind of excited, honestly.
For young people, right? Because we know the Democratic Party was just sloughing off young voters under Biden. And I think that Harris helps bring them back. And the memes help increase young people's consciousness that there's an election, that there is this interesting woman on the ballot, that they might check it out a little bit. And so that, I think, does have some positive benefit in boosting attention and interest, which then can translate into votes.
And it was never cool to support Joe Biden, but maybe it can be cool to support Kamala Harris. All right, this has been a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much, Amanda Marcotte, Jenny Stromer-Galley, and Ayelet Waldman.
Oh, come on.
Boundary Issues is produced and edited by Paul Waldman. Our music is by Zeke Shabon. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at waldmanpodcast@gmail.com. See you next time.